John Lasseter's Cars is a 2006 animated feature depicting anthropomorphic cars. It follows the story of a rookie racer, Lightning McQueen, as he grapples with his career and his love for a small hick town off Route 66. The movie invokes feelings of intense existential dread when considering the nature of the car's intelligence and state of being. It makes one consider what it really means to be human. Is to be human to have 2 legs but no feathers? Is it the physical characteristics that makes up our biology? Is it having teeth, a heart, hands and feet? Is it having a brain and a spinal cortex? Oscar Pistorius is clearly a human, despite missing a significant percentage of what a typical human is made of. Is a brain and spinal cord floating in a vat that is kept artificially live human? Is Mater human? Sapience is characterized by the unique intelligence and self-awareness that humans possess, in contrast to most animals. If something possesses sapience, we can say that it is aware of itself and the world around it on the level that we are, and has the computational ability to understand the world in verbal terms. A cat can understand the world, but its understanding is instinctual, as opposed to verbal. A cat understands its prey, or its family, or its owner in relation to itself. A threat. Food. Someone who will give them food and companionship. A human, however, can understand things as they are, using language to make sense of it. A mouse is a composite of tiny molecules operating based off of chemistry and biology, and formed based off of millions of years of natural selection, a process we call evolution. This is a verbal understanding of a mouse that only a sapient creature can understand. Cars in Cars possess sapience. Near the beginning of the movie, Sally explains to the residents of Radiator Springs aspects of car economy to convince them to make McQueen fix their road. They are capable of using complex abstract thought in order to understand the mechanics of their world, and use words in order to formulate ideas about it. This is a defining characteristic of higher sapient intelligence. We would not define these anthropomorphic cars as human. Humans are Homo sapiens. They are a specific biological structure that we define in relation to other life on Earth. 2 legs, no feathers. But we would empathize with these characters because they possess human characteristics, the most important of which would be sapience. They have the capacity to think, to feel, the capacity for language, and perhaps consciousness. But we'll get back to that topic later. The point is, we connect with McQueen's plight. He wants to race, to be the best, to win the spot at the Dinoco Racer. But he also learns the value of living in the moment, the value of friends. At the beginning of the movie, he's too fast for a small town like Radiator Springs, but as the movie progresses, he learns to slow down, to appreciate life for what it is. We empathize with this plot because we relate to it as beings who possess sapience in a world similar to the Cars world. But should we care about Lightning McQueen and his adventure? Logically speaking. If he were real, should we empathize with his life and want what's best with him? Should we maybe try to help him if he were a friend, because we think that's an ethical thing to do? Here we can explore morality, in a philosophical topic known as moral relativism. Moral relativism is something that I might discuss more closely in another video, so for now you will get a brief discussion of it relating to this movie. Before we ask about sapient creatures, let's first talk about a life form that might be considered lower, a non-sapient creature like a spider. A spider cannot understand the world as it is, but only understands it in relation to its instincts, like the cat example from earlier. A fly to us is, again, a composite of atoms animated by chemistry and biology, formed by evolution. But to a spider, a fly is food. It's a thing you capture in a web, which is something it secretes from its abdomen in order to catch flies and provide shelter. The spider doesn't even understand its own behavior, or why it does what it does. It just does it because natural selection culled out the spiders who didn't capture flies and eat them. Or in other words, do what it does. Whenever we see a spider, a lot of the time we'll kill it without much of a second thought. Some particularly empathetic people might feel bad and instead move it outside, but a lot of us won't think twice about stomping it. Why? What about a spider's life or suffering has any less value than a human's? If we gave it some thought, we would come to the realization that stomping a spider would be actually immensely painful for it. There's information circulating within its brain during the moment of your boot connecting to it, chief of which would be an emotion we understand as pain. Can you imagine if you were conscious of this same information? Something several thousand times your weight comes crashing down to smush the life out of you in an instant. Sometimes they survive an initial hit. Can you imagine struggling for breath using your crushed lungs, utterly terrified of the godlike influence of the massive boot coming down to destroy you? This is information that goes through the neural circuitry of a living being. We do not know if this living being is conscious in the same way that we are conscious, meaning that there is a proverbial ghost in the machine that experiences everything its brain is computing, in the same way that we experience our emotions, senses, impulses, etc. But we can perhaps infer that this creature has consciousness based off of the fact that it is a composite of biological mechanisms operating based off of chemistry and physics formed by evolution. This is the only way we can account for the consciousness of another being other than us. Intelligence cannot account for a ghost in the machine. The ghost is, by very definition, metaphysical. You are experiencing the functions of your brain, but there is no physical account for the you in that sentence. There is no gland in the brain that we can destroy, and then all of a sudden that human isn't conscious anymore. Not that outsiders would be able to tell if the consciousness is destroyed either way. Morality is predicated on this idea of consciousness. Altruism can be defined as the following. Conscious beings are capable of suffering, and are capable of happiness. I want there to be in the world the least amount of suffering experienced by conscious beings possible, and the most amount of happiness experienced possible. This is an ultimate altruism, and can be applied to all beings that are conscious. This begs an important question, however, and relates to our discussion of cars. What what beings are conscious? Is Lightning McQueen conscious? We assumed earlier that spiders are conscious, but there's no real way to prove that they are. It just follows logically that they are based off of their biology. If we follow the same rules, however, then a being made up of a mechanical structure which mirrors a biological structure of a creature is capable of being conscious. The truth is, we just don't know. Descartes' famous idiom, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, proves logically the existence of our own consciousness as we understand and perceive it. I, being a ghost in the machine that is my biological body, perceive the senses and neural operations of said body, and therefore I exist based off of the merits of me perceiving myself. Descartes' argument presents a scary possibility, however. Here's a cool article to browse at 3 a.m. Problems of Other Minds, under the article for consciousness. It suggests the idea of philosophical zombies, which are humans with physical characteristics that are exactly the same as your own. The only difference would be the fact that they do not have a consciousness. There is no ghost in the machine that perceives the functions of their brain. The functions of their brain are still there. They're physical. They're provable. You can crack open its skull and look at the chemicals operating within it, but its consciousness is not physical. You cannot see its consciousness. You cannot understand its consciousness in physical terms. There is no ghost in the machine that perceives the functions of their brain. There is no ergo in cogito ergo sum. There is no I in I think, therefore I am. Your consciousness, which can be understood and proven by argumentative terms, non-physical terms, cannot be argued for, cannot be understood, cannot be logically proven to exist under physical terms. There is no logical or physical way to prove that other humans or animals are conscious. This is disturbing when you consider morality. Morality is predicated on consciousness, as we've explored before. Those who are capable of feeling suffering, conscious beings who perceive their pain or emotions, are important when considering the implications of a moral act. You cannot prove that the spider you're about to crush under your boot will even have some form of consciousness to experience the immense pain its biology is going to process. You can only prove that you are here to consider it all. I can't even prove that you are here to consider it all. I can only prove that I am here to consider it all. Let's return to cars. What is Lightning McQueen? Let's return to cars. What is Lightning McQueen on a physical level? Is he purely mechanical? A motor vehicle constructed of metal, perhaps, with a brain running off of software? In the first Cars movie, it might appear so. There is zero mention of food or anything biological for that matter. We see cows who are just tractors. We see flies who are just tiny cars with wings. Instead of food, they drink oil, which is something hilariously contradicted in its sequel. We can liken the characters in Cars to androids, beings who have sapience because their programming is advanced enough to process the world as it is on a level similar to humans. They have artificial, mechanical, verbal intelligence. The fields of psychology and neurochemistry are really cool because they can make sense of the brain in terms of physical objects operating a certain way based off of chemistry and physics. We can infer based off these fields that it may be possible to replicate the human brain using mechanical objects or software. Movies that take inspiration from Cars, like Alex Garland's Ex Machina and Spike Jonze's Her, explore this topic very deeply. They explore sapience in mechanical terms. Are artificially intelligent beings conscious in the same way that cogito ergo sum proves that I am? Again, we don't know. But if we assume that entities that share similar characteristics of biology than us might be conscious, like humans or animals, then we can also assume that creatures with an artificial biology might be conscious as well. We can extend this logic even further with a little help from thermodynamics. Let's return to Wikipedia. And a lot of people don't like Wikipedia, but it's really hard to find other documentation for shit like this, so for a stupid YouTube video, I'm going to use it. Boltzmann Brain is another fun article to browse at 3 a.m. Thank you, gay cat, for showing me it. If you're watching this, you know who you are. A Boltzmann brain is named after Ludwig Boltzmann, who proposed the idea of particles fluctuating in space randomly over a long enough period of time could, if for a short moment, structure themselves in a formulation similar enough to a biological brain, and gain consciousness for the short amount of time that it's formulated like that. It's extremely unlikely, but with enough particles bouncing around for long enough time and space, it could happen. Of course, unless I were a floating brain in the cosmos forming into existence for a brief amount of time, cogito ergo sum cannot prove that a Boltzmann brain would be conscious. Having discussed all this, we can extend our initial question to the real world, as well as more areas in the speculative fictional world. Should we care about Lightning McQueen? What about Scarlett Johansson's character from Her? Or a Boltzmann brain? Or a spider? Or a human being? All of these things share some level of cognitive functioning, whether artificial or biological, but we simply do not know if they are conscious. There is no way to discern whether or not they are philosophical zombies, whether there is a ghost in the machine, whether there is an ergo. If we predicate morality based off of consciousness, there is no way we can logically prove that we should care about them. How do we know if there is a consciousness to share the suffering of the mechanical or biological operations of these beings? We don't. From my own perspective, I can only know that I have consciousness, and nobody else. Morality based off of consciousness, therefore, is entirely illogical, or at least cannot be proven to be valid logically. We can validate it emotionally. We can feel implicitly based off of our empathetic brains that it feels correct to be moral. But this is only a defense mechanism, a result based off of millions of years of natural selection culling out humans who weren't empathetic to cooperate with each other based off of their empathy. But this implicit understanding of morality isn't logical. If you wish to live your life logically, you might not need to consider it. We human beings aren't really motivated by logic, however. If we were, we'd either kill ourselves or just do nothing all day. But nihilism is a topic for another video, so I won't develop the point further. If we choose to live our lives based off of irrational whims and motivations of our naturally selected emotions, then we should take morality into account. There are many reasons why being an immoral person will cause you suffering. Psychologically speaking, it's almost as if your brain fights you from doing so. Guilt and shame are negative, punishing emotions you feel when you do something you know is wrong. If you wish to mitigate these uncomfortable emotions, then you may choose to be a good person. If you want to sit back and watch a fun movie, if you want to care about Lightning McQueen for a few hours, even if there is no logical reason to do so, you might do it anyway. This behavior is motivated by your emotions, but not anything founded in logic.